Hey guys, what's going on? Andy Baker here of andybaker.com and owner of Kingwood Strength and Conditioning. And a couple weeks ago on the Starting Strength Forum, the programming forum that I host, I put up a thread on there for everybody to send in a quick question, and I would compose a Q&A video that I would get back out there after a week or so. And I said I would select the first 10 good questions off of there. And then instead of responding to them on the forum like I normally do, I thought I'd throw them into a video format just for a little something different. So that is that's what we're doing today. So I actually went ahead and selected, I probably had about 25 or 30 responses on there. I selected actually 13 that I thought were good questions. A lot of the questions were more of, can you write me a new program type deal, more of a programming consult type deal than a quick question. But got 13 here from a pretty broad base of topics, so let's get to it and see what we can figure out. First question was, what do you think of the paused deadlift? I've seen it being used in some programs. What's your opinion of it? How to use it, etc. So the paused deadlift is basically, for those of you that don't know, it's basically a version of the deadlift where you would deadlift it off the floor like normal, and then somewhere around knee height, you would stop and hold the weight for 2 or 3 seconds, and then go ahead and finish the deadlift. So it's basically a deadlift with a pause at about knee height. Okay. I have not used that exercise in my own programming or with the programming for my clients, so I can't. I can't say with 100% certainty how exactly I would program it in terms of sets, reps, and that sort of thing. I know Dr. Jordan Feigenbaum uses it quite a bit in his programming, which is probably where you've seen it being used. So he'd probably be better to ask than me on how exactly he uses it. But just, kind of knowing what I know about exercises and loading and all that, obviously you're going to use less weight on a pause deadlift than you would use on a regular deadlift. I would think that it probably qualifies as like a medium day type exercise, so like kind of a medium day stress, something probably equivalent to like what is the type of stress, the systemic stress that like a stiff-legged deadlift or something like that would produce. So obviously a stressful movement. It's still a heavy barbell movement. It's a deadlift variation, but not as stressful as a regular deadlift. Probably not as stressful as a rack pull. So I would say, it's obviously an intermediate to advanced exercise, not a novice movement. So that would be something like on a heavy, light, medium type routine, that I would probably plug into like a medium day. So if you're going to deadlift heavy once a week, then on the medium day, you could rotate that in with other deadlifting variations. I would think that as you got stronger on those, it might actually become something that you could use on a heavy day, alternated back and forth with a deadlift. So perhaps one week you deadlifted heavy, and then the next week you did the pause deadlifts, and then on a medium day you did like the stiff-legged deadlift. I would also think that you could probably use it as back-off work. So you do a set of heavy deadlifts, and then follow that up with 2 or 3 sets of pause deadlifts. I could see that working as well. So I don't really have much of an opinion on it. I don't see anything fundamentally wrong with training that movement. I just myself have not used it, so I can't really be the authority on it. What do you think about what should a lifter do after a layoff? Should I resume a linear progression after a layoff, even if I'm already an advanced or intermediate lifter? Yeah, a lot of guys always want to do that. They have a layoff of, they got sick or they traveled or they just got burned out on the gym or whatever it was. And you see a lot of guys that kind of always want to go back to that linear progression. I would say like if you're like an early intermediate and you had a pretty lengthy layoff, that might be a good idea to do that. If you've been training for several years and you're kind of a late stage intermediate or certainly an advanced athlete, I would not recommend really going back to a linear progression unless your layoff was a really long time. If you were out of the gym for a year or something like that, I don't typically recommend that. No matter how long your layoff was, your linear progression is not going to behave the same way the second or third time that you try it as it did the first time that you went through it. You're going to move through it much faster. You may start very light, but there is, the muscle memory thing is a real thing. And even after being off for a long time, it's your strength is going to come back much quicker. And so you're going to run through that linear progression much faster than you did the first time. So, you may have been a 450-pound squatter, and you may come back after a long layoff and start back with 225. But you're probably going to be back to at least close to where you were, within a few months. It really doesn't take all that long if you get back into it the right way. And so even if you do like a short type of linear progression, I would also space it out a little bit more. If you were, especially if you were a little stronger lifter, I don't know that I would try doing like 3 sets of 5, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I would probably, maybe just do it like twice a week, like a twice weekly linear progression with much bigger jumps in between. I know I've had a few layoffs, here and there over the years, and I've never gone back and done a traditional LP. But whatever strategy I used to try to get back up in weight, I was always able to make, fairly large increments, of progress. I didn't, go 300 and then 305 and then 310 and then 315. It would be more something along the lines of, 300, 335, 355, 375. It's like 20, 15, 25 pound jumps. So, if you're a stronger lifter. So that's going to be hard to do for like 3 sets of 5, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you might actually be slowing down your progress by training more frequently and trying to use more volume. So maybe a little less frequently with bigger jumps is probably the better idea. So supplemental lifts. Do you program these supplemental movements on the same day as their parent exercise or with the opposing lift? Okay, so I think basically what he's asking is like on a split routine, let's say Monday is your bench press day and Thursday is your press day, and you want to do supplemental overhead work and supplemental bench press work. Do you bench and then do your supplemental bench press and then do your supplemental press right after that? Or do you flip-flop them around? For just general strength, where you want to even focus on both lifts, I would definitely say to flip-flop them around. I think it's better to have a little bit more frequency and exposure to each kind of movement pattern. Same thing on the squat and the deadlift. So I would do, Monday heavy bench, and then right after that I would do like either a variation of the press or just do some lighter presses, maybe for higher reps. And then, Tuesday would be heavy squat, and then I would do a light deadlift or a variation of the deadlift, a stiff-legged deadlift, maybe a deficit deadlift, maybe one of those pause deadlifts, something like that. And then Thursday, you would go your heavy overhead press day, and then following that, you would do something like pause bench or close grip bench. Friday would be like your heavy deadlift day, and then you would follow that up with like a lighter squat variation. So it could be front squats or pause squats or box squats or a squat with a specialty bar, or whatever you wanted to do. But that's typically how I would, or just lighter squats again. That's typically how I would program for that sort of thing. I like to flip-flop them better than doing all of the same type of work on one day. I think that's going to work better for most people. Is there a baseline of volume for a 50-plus lifter, for a 50-plus intermediate lifter? That's a little bit of a tough one. I would say that it depends on, obviously how frequently you're training. My general recommendation for like a volume day type session, where the emphasis of that particular workout is to accumulate volume. My general rule of thumb is like between 15 and 25 total reps. The actual set rep combination is malleable. It's not like fixed, but like an example would be 5 sets of 5 would be 25 reps, or 5 sets of 4 would be 20 reps, 6 sets of 4, 24 reps, 6 sets of 3, 18. So, like anywhere in that range between like 15 and 25 total reps is a pretty good dose of volume that I think is effective for most people, regardless of age. And then, that work being between about 75 and 85% of a lifter's 1RM. So which a lifter may not always know their 1RM, but usually if I'm programming for somebody, I have a pretty good idea if I'm in that ballpark. And I'm not always using percentages. I may just be basing it off of whatever they did the last week or the last workout. But if you do the calculations, you would find that typically those numbers, if the programming is running right, will fall between 75 and 85% of 1RM. So obviously, if you're at the higher end of the intensity spectrum, so you're closer to that like 85% of 1RM, then your total volume might be a little bit lower. It might be closer to like that 15 range, so I might be doing 5 or 6 sets of triples, for a volume day load on that. If it's a little lighter, down towards the 75% range, then that would be something where you would do 5 sets of 5, or maybe even 5 sets of 6, or maybe even like 4 sets of 8, go a little bit higher, go a little bit out of that. But typically it's going to be between 15 and 25 total reps for between 75 and 85% of 1RM, knowing that as you get higher on the intensity thing, you typically go down a little bit on the volume. That's a little bit dependent on the lift and the lifter. It might be a little bit more volume on benches and presses than what you might be doing on the squats and the deadlifts. Someone that's, very neurologically efficient, very, very strong, probably doing a little bit less volume than somebody, earlier in their development, might need a little bit more volume to kind of push it. And then it also depends on what you're doing later in the week. Are you doing other, kind of light and medium day sessions using supplemental lifts to also accumulate volume across the week? Are you doing a heavier day later in the week where you're doing something, at 90% or above? So I kind of look at the total week, not just each day, to see how much, I kind of look at weekly volume, not just per session volume. So, and I make sure that everything kind of fits so that all of the different metrics are all moving.